Welcome back to the Shotgun Studio podcast. My name is Keith. I'm your host. This is episode 3. And this week, I want to talk about just jumping into things and in a good way. And it's primarily going to be on YouTube and podcast related, but also something else that I kind of just jumped into as well that we'll kind of go over. But before we get started with that, the microphone that I'm using this week, if you can't see this in the video version and listening to audio only, you are listening to the Shure SM7B. This is a really popular microphone. If you watch a lot of video podcasts, you might recognize it. Tons of people use it out there. It's awesome. The downside is it is about $400 brand new, so not the cheapest mic. So with the Rode Pod mics, those come in around $100, so I can buy 4 of those for the price of one of these. This one I bought used and have had no issues with it whatsoever. I use it on this podcast, my other one. I've even had other guests try it out, and no matter who's using it, it sounds really good. And the cool thing with the Rodecaster Pro 2 is it does have this microphone as a setting in here. So Rode has kind of made a setting for this microphone, how they feel it will sound the best. So if you have a Rodecaster Pro 2, you can just select the Shure SM7B option on there if that's what you're using and get the best sound out of it according to Rode. And it sounds really good. I have had 0 issues with it. So this is the mic this week, Shure SM7B. And also, if you're interested, in our other podcast, we do a whiskey of the week. So the whiskey that I'm drinking this week is the Jameson Black Barrel. That has become one of my favorites to just drink. We've actually had it on that podcast a couple times just because it's one of our favorites. So if you're into whiskey and want to try something a little bit different, it is an Irish whiskey, but has a little more char flavor to it because it is that Black Barrel. So that is the whiskey that I'm drinking this week. So moving on to the main topic, just jumping into things. So when it comes to like YouTube and even podcasting, a lot of people want to do a channel. They want to start a YouTube channel or even a podcast, but what's really stopping them is they don't know what they want to do, or they think they don't have the equipment to do it. So they see all these YouTube videos with everybody having this really expensive equipment that they're using. Everything looks nice. They're using multiple cameras, even these expensive cameras. And yeah, that all helps. And not everybody just has all that and then starts the channel. You really just start with what you have. And then as you grow, your equipment will grow. You'll start bringing in stuff that will help your production and your workflow according to you. You don't have to buy everything that you see everybody else using. A lot of people still just use their iPhones and that's it. And that's what I would recommend doing is if you're wanting to start a channel or even a podcast, then just start basic, because you may get into it and lose interest or find out that's not something that you actually want to keep doing. And then that way you don't have a lot of money invested in it. And then if it's something that you find out you really like and want to continue to do and get better at it, then yeah, that's when you start buying equipment and learning what works best for you and learning new tricks and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I did. Is when I started my main YouTube channel, probably 9 years ago now or so, I had a free video camera that I got from a work thing. So I had a 1080p video camera and that was it. I didn't have any lighting or anything. And I just started making videos. I think I bought a $20 tripod for that camera. And one of my most popular videos still on that channel is one that I made 8 or 9 years ago on how to clean a Rigger 1022 takedown. Because when I made that, there weren't very many videos on it. So the manual kind of showed you how to do it, but I wanted to, show people how to actually do it because I'm more of a visual learner than anything. So I went ahead, learned how to do it, and then I made a video about it. And it became very popular because that's a popular gun that people are needing to know how to take it apart and clean it properly and put it back together. So the audio and video in that is not very good. The lighting is pretty terrible. Like I said on the first podcast, I was just using a dining room table and, an overhead light that I had. And then I think I had like a floor lamp that had a side that was kind of coming onto it, but it's still really dark. And I was just using the audio from that camera. So it's not the best. and I was just editing directly from YouTube Studio. So clipping everything together, and you could hear me shutting off and turning on the record button every now and then. So the video and audio quality are terrible, especially now in YouTube standards, but it's still informative. I've remade that video probably last year and did the same video, but with better lighting, better video, and the old one still gets more views for whatever reason. So obviously, if you do a video and you don't have all the great equipment, but you're giving out the information that people need or want to learn from, then that video will be fine. Obviously, now cameras with your phones shooting 4K. So right there, it's going to be better than that video I made 8 years ago because I just had a 1080p camera that wasn't the best. As decent at the time, I guess. But now if you watch it, you're like, oh man, this is garbage compared to everything else. But so don't let equipment stop you from just jumping into YouTube or podcasting. Just start with the basics and learn, and you'll be able to do some research, see what other people are using, and kind of then bring in equipment on your workflow. Like with me, I just started our podcast with a computer and two USB mics that I was running into for the camera. We were just using my iPhone in 4K. So I had a cheap tripod, just had that set up, had the camera just recording straight from the phone. And then I had two I had two Samsung Q2U microphones plugged in because they're both USB and XLR capable. So I knew that if we kept going with this, I would eventually want to get the Rodecaster Pro. But with these, I have that option to add in. That means I didn't have to go buy XLR microphones. The Samsungs were USB and XLR, which was awesome. So doing the research on what microphones to use, and that was it. We just started. The Samsung microphones come with little stands that we use because I didn't have any boom arms at the time. And the first episode that we did actually never got released. It was just kind of a test episode. And then after that, I kind of figured out some different things. And I think I ended up having to get a third microphone. And that's when I just bit the bullet and bought the Rodecaster Pro and got the pod mic because we had 3 people on there. But even with the Rodecaster Pro, we were still using the iPhone camera for a long time. Didn't have any dedicated lights. I didn't have all this lighting in the background that you see now. We had a different table, and each podcast you would see a different background because we would position the table differently, trying to figure out which was best. But we didn't let that lack of equipment or experience stop us from doing that. We're like, hey, let's try to do a podcast, figure it out, and if we like it, we'll keep doing it, grow with each episode. And then if we don't like it, then we don't have to keep doing it. And it is something that we have found. Obviously, on that podcast, we're getting ready, pretty close to hitting 40 episodes, and we do one a week. So that's been almost a year straight that we've been doing that podcast. So it's really fun and something we enjoy. And so I have gained a lot of equipment, different stuff to make my workflow easier as far as like programs, Ecamm Live, Buzzsprout for getting the podcast out there and audio only, Rodecaster Pro, and then just a bunch of microphones because I kind of have a microphone addiction. I like the sound of the Shure SM7B, but I also like testing out what other microphones look like and how they sound with each person that's on our podcast, because like the Rode pod mics are great, but they are really focused on the high end and don't have a lot of bass to them. So if I know I'm going to have somebody on that doesn't have a deep voice, I'm not going to give them the Rode pod mic. I'm going to give them something different, maybe the Shure SM7B, or vice versa. If somebody has a really deep voice, maybe I will give them the Rode because it'll probably sound good on them. So, and just trying different like condenser and dynamic microphones. I love that. I'll probably do a separate podcast or video on just microphones because I think I have upper to mid-teens worth of them. And this Shure is by far the most expensive one I have, and I love it. I don't think I'm going to buy 2 or 3 more just because of the price. I could buy other microphones that probably sound just as good. But having one of these is nice, especially for a solo podcast. Yeah, I like it. So start off with what you can and just jump in. Don't be afraid to fail, because your first videos are going to be your worst videos. There's a learning curve. You're going to figure out how to edit videos. You're going to get better with each video you upload because you're going to get more editing experience. So just because your first videos are your worst videos doesn't mean you should stop. Just keep going. And you'll see from when I restarted that channel after I took a long break, the first videos I started putting out again weren't as good as they are now. And it's because I started learning different things about lighting. I'm doing my research, and that helped a lot. And just changing up the lighting helped tremendously and changed that a lot. And the audio too helped a lot because I was just using a lavalier mic, which is fine, but isn't the ideal microphone for every situation. So figuring out what microphone for what situation and just kind of adapting that definitely helps. And just, do your research and just jump into it because you'll learn as you go. So don't be one of those people that are too afraid to do it because of that. Just do it and you'll learn. And I don't regret it at all. I still love doing this stuff. Again, that's why I started this YouTube channel. And a lot of people also kind of steer away from it because they don't know what they want to talk about. They may have like, oh, I want to do something on, working on cars to playing disc golf or, doing a moto vlog or doing a cooking channel, whatever. And unfortunately, you can't kind of combine all those on the one channel with YouTube and analytics if you really want your channel to grow. Sure, you can do that, but your channel is not going to grow like you would want it to. So even if right off the bat, if you don't know what niche you want to be in, then maybe try doing different types of videos, maybe seeing which one of those you like doing the most and can continue to do videos on and talk about. And you might find that if you're doing car videos, you kind of run out of things and would have to shift gears anyway. So then whatever else you like doing or showing people how to do might be better instead of just doing everything on those cars. Sure, you can do the videos that you want to, and then later on probably move the channel to a different direction, and that's fine. But figure it out, kind of watch, put all those different types of videos out there and just watch your analytics and see which ones are getting the best views and feedback. And that will kind of help you see what direction your channel needs to go into. You do need to find a niche and kind of stay in there. With my main channel with firearms, that's why I started this channel because, like I've said before, people coming on a microphone review probably don't really care much about the Glock versus the Springfield Hellcat. So I decided to start the two separate because they're two things I really like to do. They don't fit together. But when you're starting out fresh, I don't recommend doing multiple YouTube channels because it is a lot of work and you'll probably get burnt out pretty fast. But, start doing whatever videos you want to do it on and then just kind of see which ones are performing the best and go from there. Maybe, down the road, if you want to try something different, then yeah, you could do a separate YouTube channel, but just go in with, whatever you want to. Just think about that. It's got to be something that you can kind of make a lot of content on with audio and video, with me having like 15 different microphones, there's 15 videos right there. And then you do comparisons. There's all sorts of tutorials as far as like editing and all that stuff. So there's a lot you can do in the video and audio niche versus say like, I don't know, moto vlogging. I've kind of looked at, which we'll talk about here in a second. That could get old. People grow out of that and maybe you lose interest or anything like that. So make sure it's something that you're going to be able to talk about and keep going and won't get sick of. And if you do, that's fine. And you want to try something else, you can always change up your channel. You may lose subscribers, but then once you get that new subject out there or niche, you'll grow again. So it's kind of just a learning process. Even the big YouTube channels struggle with the same things. They get burnt out and just need to reset things and, even start doing separate channels that they can make whatever kind of content they want to, just so the analytics don't drive everything so crazy on their main channel. So speaking of not being afraid to jump into things, yeah, like it does apply to YouTube and podcasting, but also anything else, like anything that you may be interested in. So with me recently, if you haven't watched our listened to our podcast, the Workbench After Hours podcast, our latest episode, I did purchase my first motorcycle, and I had never had any interest whatsoever in learning how to ride one or anything about them. And until recently, it's kind of funny. So, about a month ago, I got a scooter moped. I don't know what it's classified as, but it's got a 150cc engine, and it can get up there. I've gotten it up to about 55, probably go up higher, but then it gets a little sketchy. But so it gets up and goes. And I have never ridden one. I've always wanted like a moped or a scooter, but they were a little expensive, and it's just something I never actually did. But I got this one for pretty cheap and couldn't pass it up, especially since it was basically brand new. So, um, first time I rode it, I almost wrecked it because it's completely different. Takes some getting used to steering it, because it's not like a car where you steer with the wheel. You have to really lean into it, kind of like you would a bicycle. So took me a little while to get comfortable on it, but then after riding it, I'm like, all right, this is cool. Like it's fun to go fast and just cruise around on, but I kind of want something with some sound to it, like a motorcycle. Because me personally, I love the sound of Harley Davidson motorcycles, that deep rumble sound. I love that. So I knew nothing about motorcycles. I've never had an interest in it before. So I'm like, you know what? If I'm thinking about possibly getting into one, why not just start researching it and get into it? If I end up not liking it, then I don't have to, ride one if I don't want to. And I found out that there is a learn to ride course at one, our local community college, but also the local Harley Davidson dealership out here does a learn to ride course, basically taking somebody who knows nothing about riding a motorcycle and teaching you how to get comfortable on it, especially at lower speeds. So I'm going to be taking that the end of this month. But with me, once I get into something, I tend to really get into it. So I started doing a ton of research on motorcycles because then I'm like, all right, I want to get a motorcycle at this point. So then I started watching just a bunch of YouTube videos, and I didn't realize many, how big of a niche that was. Um, because that I never had that in my feed because it was never something I searched before. But once you start searching for that kind of stuff, there's a lot of videos out there. People do a lot of moto vlogging, which is just them riding their motorcycle talking, usually with a GoPro or something. So it's kind of cool. It's definitely different than me sitting here in a controlled environment at a table drinking whiskey. They're actually riding around, doing all the controls for the motorcycle as they're vlogging. Kind of, it's pretty cool. So I did a bunch of research on all the different types of motorcycles that are out there. And then for me, I wanted a Harley just because it's American. I've always liked Harleys. I love the sounds. So then I started doing a bunch of research on what would be a good kind of beginner motorcycle. I don't know if I want to say entry level, but something that I can really be comfortable learning on. And did a ton of research, and then I finally decided to go sit on them because you can only get so much out of YouTube without actually physically sitting on a bike and seeing how it feels and fits to you. And it all depends on your height and size. So I went to the Harley dealership, and the first time they tried to talk me into a bigger bike than I wanted. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And so then I did some more research on the bigger one they were talking about. And I'm like, man, I don't want to spend a ton of money on my first bike and also have something that is going to be too big and powerful for me as a beginner. So I from everything that I read and watched, the Sportster Iron 883 is one of their most popular models, and it is really good for beginners because it's got an under 1,000cc engine and is so customizable. There are so many aftermarket parts that you can change and make it your own. So I kind of got that in the back of my head that I'm like, all right, I think this is what I want. But just to be sure, I went to a motorcycle dealer that sells everything. So they don't specifically just sell Harleys, they sell everything. So I went up there and spent probably a couple hours talking to the salesman about the different bikes and their experience with new riders. And then I just sat on a bunch of different ones, Couldn't test drive any of them because I don't have my license yet, but you could still get a feel for it just sitting on it and starting it up. They'll let you start it up and kind of get a feel for it. So I had my eye on obviously the Iron 883, but then I found I really liked they had the Indian Scout up there that was pretty cool, but it was I guess it was about the same cost, but it was a much bigger motorcycle and honestly it was really freaking pretty. And I'm like, man, I know you're probably going to drop a motorcycle as you're learning, even if it's just from a standstill and or getting off of it or bring it into the garage. You're probably going to drop it a time or two. I did not want to mess that one up. I would have been really mad. Um, so I'm like, it is a little bigger than I was wanting. So I ended up going back to the Iron 883 and just kept, that there was something that I just liked about that motorcycle. I really loved the way it looked. So I'm like, all right, fine. Did a little bit more research on it and everything, and especially what the price was. And I got it down to what I wanted to spend on it and ended up buying one. So I couldn't drive it home because obviously I don't have my license. So I live like less than 5 miles from where I bought it from. And the salesman actually drove it to my house because I had my truck up there too. So I couldn't drive it home anyway. And so he drove it to my house and then I gave him a ride back and then got back home and was just staring at it. I'm like, man, this is awesome. So then, watching more videos on how to actually ride it because there's a lot of videos out there on how to ride and starting it out. And if you have something, I'm like, it's sitting here. Yeah, I haven't taken that class, but I'm pretty comfortable and confident that I can figure it out. So there's a school down the street from here with a pretty big parking lot. So I'm like, after watching these videos, I felt pretty comfortable on, it's if you've ever driven a manual, it's pretty similar with the clutch and the gears and everything. So I'm like, if I can ride the scooter, it's going to be the same thing. I just got to get used to the shifting and the clutch and everything like that. And had no issues with it. Pretty much kept it in second gear going to the school because at 25-mile-an-hour neighborhood anyway. So it's not like I was going crazy fast. Just got it in the second gear, rode up there, and just practice. With motorcycles, there's a friction zone in the clutch that you got to get comfortable with. And then it's just getting the timing right with releasing the clutch and giving it throttle and then shifting gears. So I just spent a lot of time practicing that. And, I've learned a lot from YouTube and kind of had that stuff in the back of my mind, but it's just you got to get a feel for it and just kind of jump into it. So I'm like, I could wait until the end of the month and try that class, but I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to jump right in. And, if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. And so it went well. I went up there, haven't dropped the bike yet. And I've actually gotten to where I can drive around the neighborhood and some of the main streets just fine. Been up to the school practicing, just getting that shifting down right. And then also practicing downshifting as well. Takes some getting used to, and then also getting your endurance in your hands for controlling that clutch and everything, because that's something that you don't really use. Or if you don't ride a motorcycle, you probably don't have that muscle built up in your hands for that. So my hand does get fatigued quite easily with pulling in that clutch a bunch, but that's something that will get better over time and the more I do it. So it's just something that I jumped into. I went from knowing nothing about motorcycles to freaking riding one on my own. So it's fun. If there's anything out there, and it's like life's short, like, we could all die tomorrow. So it's like, if there's anything you want to do, just freaking do it. Don't make up excuses on why not to do something. Again, I'm like, I don't know how to ride a motorcycle, but I'm not going to let that hold me back. I, had experience riding that scooter or moped, and it's pretty much the same thing. You just have to learn how to shift gears. It's a little bit bigger, sound really cooler than the moped. So it's just something I jumped into and don't regret it at all. Unfortunately, I have that kind of personality to where if I get into something, I get into it all the way. And that's kind of where I ended up with all these microphones and everything too, with this podcast and YouTube channel. So Never expected it would be a motorcycle, especially so soon. And so, yeah, went from not owning anything on two wheels other than just a bicycle to now I have a freaking scooter and a motorcycle sitting in my garage, taking up my space. But it's good space. I like it. Really love that bike, man. It's awesome. If you haven't seen, I'll try and put some pictures up of it and some B-roll over here. But I just love the look of those Sportster motorcycles. It's all black, and the paint on like the tank and everything is like a flat black. They call it denim, but it's a matte and not glossy. And I like that blacked out look. The chrome was cool, but I just like the blacked out look now. It's easier to maintain. You don't have to polish the chrome and all that stuff. So it's just the blacked out look I really like. And I just like the look of the Sportsters. They're freaking awesome. There's not a lot of stuff on it. So you don't have like bags on it. You don't have like a windshield. You don't have all the unnecessary stuff, because this is something I'm just going to use to cruise around locally with. It's not something I'm going to be taking on long trips. It's not built for that. You could do it. It's not going to be as comfortable as a bike that's built to cruise on highways for a long period of time. So that was one thing I had to decide on. And I'm like, I'm just I just want to cruise around town, and if I want to go for a little bit longer distances, this I can do it with this. Um, but yeah, it's a good starter bike, and there's so many aftermarket parts that I'm already looking at too, just to change it up a bit. Want to get a different exhaust system, or just at least mufflers on there to get it a little bit louder. The stock exhaust on the Harleys aren't the best, but that's just because every state and or country has different standards with the EPA and everything and noise. They have to meet the qualifications so they can sell it to all those places. And that's why there's so many aftermarket parts, even through Harley Davidson, to make it louder, depending on if it's legal where you live. So long story long, if there's anything you want to do, don't let anything hold you back. Just do it. And you probably won't regret it, because if it's something that you may not like, and that's fine, you can at least say that you did it and tried to do it. So if you're wanting to start a YouTube channel, wanting to do a podcast, hell, if you want to get a motorcycle, at least take the learn to ride course, because that way you can actually sit on one. If you've never sat on one before or been on one, this will tell you if you're going to like it or not. So it's 4 hours of like classroom work and then 2 full days of learning how to ride, and they start you up just sitting on it, learning how to start it, then just moving it back and forth. And it takes a while before you actually get to any moving, driving with the motorcycles, because they want you really comfortable at first. So if you have in the back of your mind ever wanted to maybe learn how to ride a motorcycle, just take the class. It's not very expensive, and that will tell you if it's something you're going to like or not. And if you don't, you're only out the money for that class, and you could say you tried to learn how to ride one and just didn't like it, wasn't for you, and that way you know. And there's the same thing with flight lessons. There's a airport right by us where they do a learn to fly thing, but luckily that's not something I'll get into, because I don't like heights and my eyesight's terrible, so I don't think they would let me do it anyway. But again, there's so many different things that you can get into. And I think people, even with the flying, people are like, oh, I don't know how to fly. Well, no shit. They're going to teach you how to fly. So that's why you take this class. You don't need your own airplane to learn to fly. They provide it for you, just like they provide those motorcycles for you in those learn to ride classes, which is nice, because you don't have to be like me and then buy a motorcycle and take it up there and learn how to ride and possibly drop it or anything. If you drop it, you're going to drop theirs and don't have to worry about damaging yours if you have one. So that's a plus side, I guess. And then if you can either get any of your buddies or even your significant other into that thing too, that might help you, because you're not just going into it alone. You're going into it with other people that you know and can learn together. And it's probably going to be funner to learn something new with somebody that you're close to, because that way you can learn from each other. Maybe one person's getting better at this portion than the other person. You can help each other out and just kind of learn off, each other, and it's something fun to do, especially if it's something you learn to do with your wife. My wife did want to learn how to ride the motorcycle, but I talked her out of it um, because I just knew she wasn't going to like it. And I had her ride the scooter, and she did drop it, but she handled it like a champ. Got right back up and does plan to ride the scooter. I told her to get comfortable with that first, and then we'll look into the motorcycle stuff. So she's gonna inherit that scooter and drive that around. So maybe once she gets comfortable with it, we can kind of ride around town together with those, which would be pretty cool. But if you have some buddies like I have, one of my best friends on our other podcast, so he's been doing that Workbench After Hours podcast with me since day one, and same thing with my neighbor. Um, so it's just something that none of us had done podcasting before ever. And we just kind of jumped into it. I did a lot of research and they did some too. And we've just been learning as we go. And it's definitely helped having them with me. And then also, it's easier to have multiple people think of topics because there's sometimes that you have trouble thinking of a topic, especially if you've been really busy. The fact that I have two podcasts now, two YouTube channels, a full-time job, and a bunch of other stuff going on, it gets tough to find time to think of topics that you can talk about for an hour. Because that's usually what we do over there is try and keep them about an hour or so. And so then that way, if I'm like, I can't think of anything, then they're like, oh, hey, we can talk about this and that. And so that's helpful as well, especially for the podcasting. That's definitely been something that's kept us going. I feel like if I would have done that podcast strictly myself, I don't know if I would have gotten as far because I for sure would have run out of things to talk about, especially with, almost 40 weeks into it. That's a lot of stuff. So having guests on is really cool too, because then you can basically make the guests talk most of the podcast and you just have to sit there and ask them questions. Which is really cool, which I'm going to try and do on this podcast as well. Get some guests on so you don't have to listen to me talk for the entire time. So yeah, if you're out there and wanting to start a podcast or even a YouTube channel, just use your phone, do a lot of research because there's so many videos out there and channels dedicated to how to start a YouTube channel or podcast. Check out Think Media; they're really good at it, and they're just once you Google search that, then that's all that's going to show up in your feed anyway. So you'll be introduced to a lot of channels that are specifically niched into teaching you how to do a YouTube channel, how to talk in front of a camera and get comfortable with that. And, maybe some of the equipment that you need as a beginner and then which you can grow into if that's something that you keep doing. So a lot of information out there. Again, that's how I learned everything about a freaking motorcycle is mainly from YouTube. So if there's anything outside of even what we've talked about that you want to get into, look up on YouTube, and I'm sure there's a video for everything out there. And if you see that there's something that you're interested in and can't find a lot of information on it, maybe start doing some videos on that. Learn what you can on that and be the first one to put videos out there. And that'll help grow your channel because there's going to be other people out there wanting the same thing and they're not doing it because again, no information out there on it or very limited. So the more information you can get out there in that niche or hobby or whatever it is, can be a good topic for your YouTube channel too. So YouTube has become the new Google. Instead of going straight to Google, people just go to YouTube and learn how to do things. It's pretty cool. That's how I learned how to do a lot of house projects and stuff like that. So don't be, again, I know we've talked about this a lot, or at least I have anyway. Just don't be afraid to jump into things. That's how you kind of learn, is just getting into it, and then you'll make mistakes, but you'll learn from those mistakes and what not to do and how to get better. So with this podcast and YouTube channel, I try to just get 1% better with every video that I do, whether it be like a different editing trick or whatever. Just try to get 1% better. And yeah, so far it's been fun and a good hobby to do. And just because with everybody working more virtual, I noticed it's given me a lot more confidence in my work meetings, talking to a camera or somebody. It'll give you more confidence with that way or talking. Because if you can talk to a camera by yourself for You even just like a 10-minute video or whatever, it will help you with so many more things in life, being a better communicator, even teaching people how to do stuff. So, um, it is fun. It'll teach you new skills and how to be comfortable with that. So, because talking to a camera is not natural and it does take some practice. And that's why your first videos are going to be your worst because it's awkward. You're going to mess up a lot. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to probably say a lot of ums or filler words, kind of like I still do, but try to get better at. So you'll learn that you'll get more comfortable with talking to a camera and nobody else around as you as the more content you put out. It gets a little bit easier. I still struggle with it. It's just something that you'll get used to and will get better with at time. So I think I'll keep this one short for this week just because I don't want to bore you guys too much with just me talking. If you guys have any questions or anything, let me know down in the comments. If there's anything you want me to talk about or want me to do a video on, just let me know down there. Hit that subscribe button because it will help the channel out. If you want to check out my main channel and that Workbench After Hours podcast just to see how everything's done over there, check that out. I'll post a link up here where you can check those different videos and podcasts out. So I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.